king of German mercenaries.
Chapter 329. The Emperor's advice. The letter from Marin to the Emperor was delivered by a fast horse, so it naturally reached the Emperor very quickly. At this time, the 2 reinforcement phalanxes had just set out not long ago. Maximilian I was very happy that Marin only asked for 1 seat in the imperial parliament. Of course, he was not very happy that Marin only sent 2 phalanxes of reinforcements. However, Maximilian I also knew that Marin could not come out in full force to reinforce him, because both the Duchy of Saxony, which controlled West Frisia, and the County of Oldenburg, which had Denmark as its backer, were eyeing the County of East Frisia. Therefore, it was very reasonable for Marin to send 2 or 3 phalanxes to reinforce. Of course, if he gritted his teeth, he could also get 4 phalanxes to support. Maximilian I agreed to Marin's request without hesitation because he did not have to pay for any fiefdom or title. In addition, Maximilian I wrote back to Marin, telling him that the nobles of the Habsburg family and the nobles of the Swabian League would support Marin in getting a seat in the imperial parliament. Because, this time, Marin sent troops not only to support the emperor, but also to support the Swabian League. As the supported party, they had no reason not to support Marin. However, the Saxon nobles, who also had a good relationship with the emperor, would definitely oppose Marin's entry into the imperial parliament because of the Battle of Laer County. At the same time, many hostile princes of the Habsburg family would not support Marin. However, to enter the imperial parliament, it is not necessary to have a unanimous vote, only more than half of the votes are enough. Moreover, Maximilian I clearly told Marin that although there are many people in the imperial parliament, most of them are united around the Habsburg family and the 7 electors. As long as the consent of most of the electors is obtained, the princes around the electors will most likely agree. For example, the Archbishop of Cologne, one of the 7 electors, would speak out in the imperial diet, and the surrounding affiliated powers of the Archbishopric of Cologne, such as the bishoprics of Münster, Minden, Osnabrück and Paderborn would all speak out in agreement. Similarly, other electors also have their own group of followers. Most of them surround these electors, and as long as the electors are dealt with, these people will follow the electors to vote. However, there are exceptions. For example, powerful duchies like the Principality of Clever and the Principality of Guedes tend to be more opinionated and may not necessarily agree with these electors. Therefore, if Marin wanted to be approved by the imperial parliament and become its member, he only needed to get the consent of most of the electors and those powerful and independent princes. As for how to get the electors and powerful nobles to agree, Maximilian I's suggestion was also simple and crude: bribery. In fact, Maximilian I was promoted to the position of emperor by his father, Frederick III, who spent a lot of money and connections to help him. Originally, when Maximilian I first came to power, the princes did not oppose him. However, Maximilian I clearly expressed his intention to learn from France to strengthen the royal power, which angered the princes. Strengthening the royal power is equivalent to weakening the independence of the princes, which is equivalent to cutting the prince's flesh. How could they be willing? Therefore, after Maximilian I expressed this intention when he was young, the princes became more and more resistant to him. This also led to the fact that when Maximilian I died, his grandson Charles V wanted to ascend the throne. In order to ensure his election, he had to borrow 850,000 guldens from the Fugger family and bribe the 7 electors to keep the throne. Of course, what Marin needed was not the throne, but just a seat in the imperial parliament. Therefore, he didn't need that much money. Maximilian I's suggestion was to give each of the electors 10,000 to 20,000 gold coins. As for those independent principalities, a bribe of several thousand gold coins would be enough. After all, Marin had already become the Count of East Frisia in fact, and entering the imperial parliament was just to reconfirm his identity. Therefore, this was not a big deal. Moreover, Maximilian I also helped Marin analyze and told him that the elector of Saxony and the nobles of the Saxon family need not be considered, as they are already enemies. Therefore, Marin can only choose to bribe other electors. In addition, King Vladislas III of Bohemia, one of the 7 electors, would not agree to the good thing of Marin, the emperor's thug, to make a profit because of his competition with Maximilian I for the succession to the Kingdom of Hungary. Therefore, Marin had few options but to bribe the 5 electors, including the Archbishop of Cologne, the Archbishop of Mainz, the Archbishop of Trier, the Elector of Brandenburg, and the Elector of the Palatinate. As for the Habsburg family, there was no need to bribe them, and the Swabian League would also stand on Marin's side. Then, there were some powerful nobles who were not attached to the electors, and Marin needed to bribe them. After all, the emperor gave Marin a list of about 26 powerful princes who needed to be bribed individually. Of course, for ordinary powerful nobles, a few thousand gold coins would be enough. Even 2,000 gold coins would be enough. After all, this was not a big deal. Only the 5 electors were used to big events and were quite greedy. Without tens of thousands of gold coins, they could not be moved. Marin was a little Spartan when he saw the emperor's reply. He didn't expect that even if he sent reinforcements, he couldn't guarantee that the emperor would give him a seat in the imperial parliament, and he had to spend money to bribe him. However, it is indeed a bit unreasonable not to get a seat in the imperial parliament. It is like going to college in later generations and getting a diploma but not a degree certificate, which always makes people feel uneasy. More importantly, the politically more sophisticated emperor told Marin in the letter that through this bribe, Marin could significantly improve his relationship with those princes who had no direct conflict of interest. It is always better to make one more friend than one more enemy. With more friends, you can also avoid the possibility of being beaten up to the greatest extent. Anyway, the bribes added up to only a few gold coins, and this could indeed ease the relationship between Marin and the princes, so Marin finally decided to act according to the plan. However, he did not intend to give money directly, but to use spices instead. Marin himself disliked the strong taste of spices, but the nobles liked this flavor. Anyway, the cost of buying spices was very low, and giving them away as enough gold coins was also a way to open up sales. So, Marin directly took out all the remaining spices in stock, sent people to transport them to the areas where the targets of bribery were located, and started the spice bribery. Bribing with spices can not only clear the inventory, but also look more elegant. Unlike directly bribing with gold coins, it seems too vulgar. Moreover, I don't know what the European nobles of that era were thinking, but they just loved spices and would dip their meals in spices to whet their appetite. As a result, Marin's spice bribery progressed very smoothly. It is expected that all bribes will be completed before the end of the year. When the new imperial parliament convenes in the spring of next year, Marin should be able to obtain a legal seat in the imperial parliament and become an organized person. Chapter 330, Battleship completed in early October. Just as the autumn harvest was about to begin, good news came from the Emden shipyard. The first 500-ton double-deck gun deck battleship was launched. Marin immediately gave up hosting the autumn harvest ceremony and let Geoffrey take over. He himself, with a group of attendants, went straight to Emden Port, personally participated in the launching ceremony of the first warship, and personally went on deck to participate in the maiden voyage ceremony. This 500-ton battleship was built at the same time as Amerigo's 250-ton armed merchant ships at the beginning of the year. But the difference was that the Terrelynch shipyard had a lot of experience in building 250-ton armed merchant ships, and with sufficient preparation, it was built quickly. This 500-ton warship was difficult to build because it had never been built before and the density of its ribs was much greater than that of an ordinary armed merchant ship. It was not until early October that it was completed and launched for sea trials. In the North Sea, Marin and the sailors fully felt that the ship was stable and flexible in turning. It can be said that the ship fully embodied Marin's will. Marin had long asked the 250-class armed merchant ship built by Terrelynch to increase its length-to-width ratio to 4:1, but the stubborn Portuguese designer still set the length-to-width ratio of the ship to 3.5:1. Moreover, the poop was retained. But Marin's real request was to remove the forecastle and poop, and change the stern from round to square, so that it would be easier to turn. However, the stubborn Portuguese designer thought that Marin, an amateur, was giving blind orders and refused to listen. There was no other choice. After taking over the county of East Frisia, Marin had to set up a new shipyard in Emden and promote obedient designers to realize his goals. The new designer was indeed obedient and changed the length-to-width ratio to 4:1, removed the tall poop, and changed the stern into a square shape. In this way, the characteristics of the British galleon were finally fully reflected. Moreover, this warship fully followed Marin's instructions and opened the side gun ports on the side of the lower deck to achieve a double-layer gun deck. The lower gun ports all have hinged gun port covers. When sailing normally, the gun port covers are tightly closed to prevent water from entering. Only when a naval battle occurs will the sailors open the gun port covers through the hinges and use the guns on the lower deck. Moreover, the artillery on the lower deck has a lower center of gravity and the torque generated by recoil is small, so it can use artillery with a larger caliber than that on the upper deck. For example, in the U.S. warships during the Black Ship incident, 68-pound Peksang heavy guns were placed on the lower gun deck. However, if such a large caliber heavy gun was moved to the upper deck for firing, the torque caused by the recoil would be very large. Generally speaking, early heavy naval guns were only of the 24-pound class. It was not until the early 19th century that 36-pound Caron guns were put on board ships. Of course, the Caron gun is different from the earlier 24-pounder. The earlier 24-pounder was a long-barreled heavy gun with a very heavy barrel. Once the gun carriage moved due to recoil, it was difficult to reset it. Because it was too heavy. But the Marin gun is different. Although the caliber of the Marin gun is large, the barrel is very short. In the past, naval guns, such as the Red Cannon, had a barrel length of 3 meters and a caliber of only 110 millimeters to 130 millimeters, with a length-to-caliber ratio of up to 20 to 30 times. The length of the Marin gun is only 7 or 8 times the caliber, making it very short and thick. In fact, the Marin gun has a short range because of its short barrel. However, at short range, the shell is large enough and its power is still very strong. Moreover, the British, who had been engaged in naval warfare for a long time, found that in naval warfare, generally within 500 meters, there was a greater chance of hitting the enemy ship. Beyond 500 meters, it was basically a waste of time. Moreover, within 500 meters, the hit rate was only 10% to 20%. Therefore, no matter how long the range of heavy artillery is, it is actually not very meaningful. Of course, it cannot be said that long range is useless. For example, when attacking fixed targets on land, the range of artillery is still very useful. For example, during the First Opium War, the British warships, which were still using smoothbore guns, used the Marin gun to attack the Qing warships, but used the 24-pound long-barreled heavy gun to attack land targets. Of course, when attacking the artillery positions, the British warships also ventured close and used the Marin guns to fire a salvo to attack the Qing artillery positions. Because of the low aspect ratio, the 36-pound Marin gun is no heavier than the 24-pound long-barreled gun, but the recoil is much smaller. Except for the shortcoming of a relatively short range, the Marin gun is perfect in other aspects. Thinking of this, Marin suddenly patted his head. He had forgotten to ask Old John and the others to develop the short-barreled Marin cannon. At present, this 500-ton battleship has a double gun deck, which accommodates a total of 40 12-pound heavy guns, which is very powerful. Moreover, because the side deck is thickened, the battleship itself has a strong ability to resist artillery fire. After all, in this era, there were no real warships. The most commonly used guns in naval battles were 6-pound guns and 3-pound guns. There were also 12-pound guns, but the equipment rate was very low. Generally, among the more than 20 guns in a warship, only 1 or 2 12-pound guns were equipped at the bow. Unlike Marin's warship, all of them were equipped with 12-pound guns, and the firepower was extremely strong. Moreover, in this era, many of the cannons on warships were rear-loading bronze cannons with a range of no more than 2,000 steps. Many of the cannons also used stone bullets as shells. The local tyrant Marin ordered all the 12-pound cannons on the ship to use iron ball shells cast from sand. Iron ball shells not only have better air-holding properties than stone shells and can be fired farther, but their destructive power against wooden ships is also much greater than that of stone shells. After a tour in the North Sea, Marin was very satisfied with the warship and personally named it the Hoffmann series. This warship was named Hoffmann I. Then, based on the data recorded during the previous battleship construction, Marin ordered the secret steam-bending ship rib department of the Emden shipyard to start making relevant molds based on the recorded data and prepare to mass-process the ship ribs. Next time, 4 Hoffmann-class battleships will be built together. However, for warship manufacturing materials, ship rib materials are easy to find. Because of the steam-bending technology, the cost of manufacturing ship ribs has been greatly reduced. But the main keel is more difficult to find. Because, to build a 500-ton warship, the main keel is 30 meters long, and a keel of this length can only be obtained by cutting down 300-year-old oak trees. However, due to the development of navigation, oak trees over 20 meters tall in Europe were declared as strategic resources by royal families of various countries, and their prices were also very high. The price of a main keel is higher than the price of all the ribs combined. There is nothing that can be done about it. After all, Europe, as a civilized world, has developed for 2,000 or 3,000 years, and oak trees have been cut down a lot. Oak trees over 20 meters tall are rare now. This is why Marin wanted to colonize North America, which is still an undeveloped area with dense virgin forests. It is not easy to find a centuries-old oak tree that is 30 to 40 meters tall. Although there are not many white oaks in North America, there are plenty of red oaks. Like white oaks, red oaks are also very suitable for shipbuilding. Moreover, the so-called North American white oaks are not many here, which means that they only account for a small proportion of the original forests in North America. But at this time, North America was full of towering trees that were hundreds of years old. Even if the proportion of white oaks was very low, the total number was very large. Therefore, it was very promising for Marin to open colonies in North America to cut down trees and build ships. The Spanish also realized this, so in 1610, they simply moved the center of large shipbuilding to Havana, Cuba, to facilitate the use of the abundant local timber resources. As for the mast, Marin previously required that the mast height should not be lower than the length of the hull in order to maximize the sail area and increase the speed of the ship. There is nothing wrong with this. Because the mast is not soaked in seawater, it does not need to be made of rot-resistant wood. Pine wood can do the job. Even the deck can be made of pine boards. Only the parts outside the hull that come into contact with the seawater need to be made of oak. Tall pine trees may be hard to find in Western Europe, but there are not too many pine trees in Northern Europe along the Baltic Sea, which is densely covered with coniferous forests. Therefore, the ship that Marin sent to Teutonic to sell salt not only brought back a lot of profits, but also bought back a lot of oak and pine trees for shipbuilding. However, it was too inconvenient for merchant ships to transport oak for the main keel and pine for the mast. Because the length of these woods was longer than the merchant ship itself, it was very troublesome to transport them. In order to transport such long woods, the merchant ship spent a lot of manpower to tie the required wood to the side of the ship on both sides, and then staggered back to Emden and delivered it to the shipyard. Although Amerigo will, Marin knows that the wood used for shipbuilding cannot be used immediately after it is cut down. It needs to be air-dried for 1 or 2 years before it can be used. Therefore, even if Marin sent ships to North America to cut down a large amount of wood, it could not be used immediately for shipbuilding. Instead, it needed to be dried for a long time before it could be put into use. Therefore, for now, Marin can only rely on purchasing large dried wood from Eastern Europe to build large ships. Only when Marin's logging base on the east coast of North America is built and enough oak is stored and dried, can a new shipyard be opened in North America to manufacture large warships on the spot, truly ushering in the era of Marin's dominance of the ocean. Chapter 331. Harvest still continues. While Marin was participating in the sea trials of the Hoffmann 1 battleship in the North Sea, the autumn harvest in East Frisia was in full swing. This year's autumn harvest is not much different from last year's. Although Marin organized more than 10,000 laborers from Saxony to dig ditches and drain the swamps to open up fertile fields. However, because it took a long time to open up the swamps to farmland, Marin only added 3,000 ugrams of arable land during the spring plowing. By October, those laborers had actually reclaimed 20,000 ugrams of arable land, but they were all completed in the fall, and crops could not be planted in time, and they had to wait until next year's spring plowing. Therefore, only the 3,000 ugrams of new arable land were harvested together in the autumn. The difference from last year was that at the time of the autumn harvest last year, Marin still had 60,000 ugrams of arable land, and the nobles and soldiers had 25,000 ugrams. But after the Battle of Lisle County last year, Marin distributed another 10,000 ugrams, resulting in him only having 50,000 ugrams of arable land now. The farmland of the nobles and soldiers produced a total of 168 million pounds of rye, of which they took out half, or 84 million pounds, and gave it to Marin for sale. Marin continued to sell the rye to England, but because of the large quantity, the price of rye in England fell by 0.1 penny per pound. Marin learned from the Jewish merchants he hired that the most expensive food in this era was actually in Spain. Generally speaking, the price of rye in Germany was 1 pfennig per pound, in England it was 1.5 pence per pfennig per pound, in France it was 1.2 pfennig per pound, and in Spain at the same time, it was 2 pfennig per pound. The reason for this is that although Spain is a large country, most of it is plateau. Only 11% of the country's land is located in plains below 200 meters above sea level. Only in these plains are there agricultural activities. Moreover, not all of these 11% of plains have been cultivated into farmland. Therefore, although Spain looks large, the cultivated land is not much. In addition, the population is still large, so the price of food is relatively high. It is a very cost-effective business to transport food to Spain and sell it. It just so happened that 2 new 250-class armed merchant ships were also completed. Marin simply let these 2 ships carry 660,000 pounds, about 300 tons, of rye south to Spain to test the waters. After all, selling at a higher price is also very beneficial to Marin. After all, when the nobles and soldiers in the country sold rye to Marin, they only asked for a wholesale price of 0.8 pfennigs per pound. When Marin sold rye to Britain, he charged 1.2 pfennigs per pound. Even if the price dropped to 1.1 pfennigs per pound due to the large quantity, Marin was still very profitable. If sold to Spain, where the price is higher, the price of each pound of rye will be at least 1.5 pfennigs per pound. In that case, the profit will be even greater. As for the more rye produced by Marin's own land, he did not sell it because the population of East Frisia increased by tens of thousands this year, and Marin had to use the rye to feed the new population. In October, the accounts between Marin and the Duchy of Saxony were settled. The Duke of Saxony paid 1 million golden gold coins and sent over 40,000 young and strong Saxon family members belonging to Marin. In other words, the population of Marin's East Frisian county increased by almost 60,000 people, reaching a huge population of more than 140,000 people. Fortunately, Marin had foresight and did not sell all the food in his territory last year and this year, which was enough for so many people. And, it seemed, it was also sufficient. After all, the grain reserves of last year and this year added up to more than 500 million pounds, an average of more than 3,000 pounds per person. In fact, each person consumes 500 pounds of rye per year, which is considered good. In fact, because bread is mixed with wild vegetables, sawdust, soil and other sundries, it is good if more than 300 pounds of rye is included in 500 pounds of bread. Therefore, food is very sufficient. However, Marin did not dare to ship too much now, because in this way, the secret of East Frisian country's high grain yield would be revealed. This is a deadly secret, enough to drive any lord with a lot of land crazy. Therefore, Marin would rather make less money than let others know. Therefore, Marin arranged to sell the food of his subordinates to Britain, and it was sold in the name of the North Sea Chamber of Commerce and other Dutch chambers of commerce, making it unclear about the background of East Frisia. However, due to the intelligence provided by his Jewish merchants, Marin discovered that Spain's food demand was much greater than that of Britain, and it had been relying on imports for many years. In previous years, Spain had to transport a large amount of food back to the country from its colony, Sicily, the Golden Basin, and import a large amount of food from neighboring France. After learning the news, Marin planned to open up the Spanish grain trade route, not only to make money for himself, but also to seize the interests of the French. Of course, after planning to compete with the French for the Spanish grain market, Marin sent people to order a lot of schooners, intending to use the old ship type to transport grain, and no longer use 250-class merchant ships to transport grain. At the same time, Marin planned to have those Kirk sailing ships fly the flags of the Netherlands, Britain, Denmark and other maritime powers to confuse the French and prevent them from knowing that he was poaching their customers. After sending people out to inquire further, Marin also discovered a shocking news: Italy is also short of food. Although Italy is an important grain-producing area, the outbreak of the Italian War in 1494 has caused wars to break out everywhere in Italy. Many people have fled, leaving a lot of fields barren. In addition, the French army has invaded Italy again in the past 2 years, causing agricultural production in many parts of Italy to almost come to a halt. Therefore, this year, the price of grain in Italy is higher than that in Spain. In order to obtain enough food, Italians imported grain on a large scale from Austria and other German regions. This was not enough, and Venetian merchant ships also went to Egypt and Poland and Lithuania on the northern coast of the Black Sea to import large quantities of grain. Even so, due to the massive food shortage and the continued war, many people starved to death in Italy this year. Although Marin tried his best to block the news, people abroad did not know that East Frisia had a bumper harvest, but people in East Frisia could not hide it. Among them, Marin's father-in-law, Archbishop Rovere, discovered that East Frisia had an unusually bumper harvest. During the autumn harvest, Archbishop Rovere traveled from his remote island home to the mainland with 2 followers. After observation, he found that the grain yield in the farmland of East Frisia was abnormally high. At least, the barrels and baskets used to store grain. Europeans in the Middle Ages were more accustomed to using wooden barrels and wooden baskets to store things, and the famous wheat-specific measurement unit, the quart, is a unit of volume, were more than those in Italy. This shows that the grain yield per unit area of East Frisia exceeded that of Italy. This caused great shock to Archbishop Rovere. You know, the Italian region has always been the most developed agricultural area in Europe, and the yield per unit area has always been higher than other parts of Europe. Moreover, even in Italy, the areas with high yields are only those with more volcanic ash soil. The yields in ordinary areas are not much higher than those in other areas. However, according to Archbishop Rovere's observations, the rye yield in East Frisia is probably higher than that in the richest volcanic ash soil areas of Italy. This aroused his great interest, so Archbishop Rovere took the initiative to find Marin, his son-in-law. When Marin learned that Archbishop Rovere knew the secret of East Frisia's extremely high grain production, for a moment, his eyes flashed with murderous intent, and he almost wanted to kill his father-in-law. But he quickly realized that this was his father-in-law, and he was still counting on him to become the Pope to protect him. Archbishop Rovere was also startled. From the fierce light that suddenly burst out of Marin's eyes, he knew that his son-in-law was not a good person. So he gave up the idea of finding out the secret of high grain yield from his son-in-law. In the end, Marin gave his father-in-law another 100,000 gold coins for activities, allowing him to buy more people in the papal state and prepare for his return to Rome. But in a flash, Marin sent people to arrest the 2 followers who traveled with his father-in-law during the autumn harvest and permanently restricted their freedom. Because Marin believed that his father-in-law would not reveal the secrets of East Frisia, but he did not trust the 2 followers who also knew the secrets. Archbishop Rovere was very dissatisfied, but he had no choice. Who told him to live under someone else's roof? Fortunately, only 2 of his followers who were not important knew the secret of East Frisia's high grain yield. The others, especially some of his most important followers, stayed on the Frisian islands and did not come to the land. Otherwise, Marin might have killed all the people around him.